Patrick Anthony, who we know as Paba. And I said to him, well, Paba, since you're coming, send a prayer for me. Let me say it for you. And he said that if I grew up as a good Catholic and Methodist, both of which houses I wrote in, then I should be able to say a prayer. So I'd like everybody to stand up. And good afternoon. This is an appeal to all the lords in all the heavens, all of the faiths and religions, appealing for us to be able to have the fortune of being able to go through and achieve what we have come here to do, which is not just to talk, but to discuss where we are and where we're heading. And we are searching for all of the blessings from all of the gods and lords to be with us this afternoon for the rest of the day and for the rest of the 51st CARICOM Heads of Government Conference. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. Second on our agenda, to start us off and put us in the mood, we are going to be presenting a music video. And that music video, I will say a bit more about it, but just remember that that music video you're about to see is 12 years old as CARICOM's quest for reparations from Europe for slavery and native genocide. The video is by Herb Black. He doesn't need to be introduced to St. Lucians, but Herb Black is one of our foremost local Calypsonians. And when we launched the Reparations Committee in 2013, he must have been following us, because by 2014, he had what you're just about to see. Here is Herb Black.
Yes, you, in your household with your family, your loved ones, tucked in for the night, and then it happens. Then they came, the invaders, deceptors, plunderers, traitors, ripped you from one another, man from woman, woman from children. Even babies were severed from their families, dragged into the dead of night, beaten, ambushed, brutalized, chained, and wrenched into dark, cold, musty, holding pens, put on a ship, leaving behind their language, their sold into their customs, slavery, values, beliefs, their gods, their culture, sold into slavery.
Reparation now. Reparation. Sometimes all I could do is only scratch my head when I get to thinking about slavery dread. All the struggles black man went through is well documented, it's true. Now the Europeans refuse to give to us black people what is due. Rasta always know this is a must, oh yes, cause it was prophesied by Marcus. How much will they compensate? When will blacks repatriate? How long must the black man wait to get reparation now? Tell me, no, I'm not a West Indian, true son of an African, enslaved by Europeans and want reparation now. Reparation, reparation. My heart goes out to the Haitians, the Negroes who fought for our liberation. They say Toussaint was a rebel, he was leading the black struggle. So for burning down of plantations, they held Haiti accountable. So Haiti was penalized in court, oh yes. To this day, the country is still bankrupt. How much will they compensate? When will blacks repatriate? How long must the black man wait to get reparation now? Tell me, no, I'm not a West Indian, true son of an African, enslaved by Europeans and wants reparation now, right now. Reparation, reparation. Let's look at the beneficiaries of one of the world's worst human atrocities. Was started by the Vatican, continued by the Europeans. It was one great triangle shipping slaves out of the motherland. Now they are wealthy because of us. Oh yes, all we gained was the sign of the cross. How much will they compensate? When will blacks repatriate? How long must the black man wait to get reparation now? Tell me, no, I'm not a West Indian, true son of an African, enslaved by Europeans and want reparation now. Reparation, reparation. Now listen. Now is the time I must emphasize. It's very important black people realize that it is united we stand as we forward on this mission. Our leaders must make sure we get proper representation, and for all the blood, the sweat and tears, oh yes, with one voice, let's demand our shares. How much will they compensate? When will blacks repatriate? How long must the black man wait to get reparation now? Tell me, no, I'm not a West Indian, true son of an African, enslaved by Europeans and want reparation now. Reparation, reparation. Thank you very much. Good night.
Have a round of applause. And like I said, the song is 12 years old, and I can let you know that during Emancipation Month this year, we do plan to not only honor Herb Black, but we also plan to launch a reparations song contest that we hope we will be able to encourage other Caribbean countries to be part of. And without much further ado, I'd like to invite us to listen to Ambassador Dr. June Suma, who is going to be doing the welcoming address. Dr. Suma, I must say, was the former chair of the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent of the United Nations. She was St. Lucia's first ambassador to CARICOM, and she's normally called June the First because everything she does to achieve, she becomes the first. So she'll be our first presenter this afternoon. Here is for June.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, all. Earl did not establish the protocol. So I'd like to recognize, first of all, Dame Paulette Louise, who is our Governor General Emerita. And Dame Paulette is part of our National Reparations Committee. And so I also want to recognize prime ministers, honored guests, speakers, etc., ambassadors, and to say that it is very humbling for me to be sitting in a room so close to all of you, to welcome you to what St. Lucia National Reparations Committee has been doing over the last few years. As Earl said, I am June Suma. I sit on the National Reparations Committee. I sit on the CARICOM Reparations Committee. I am a member of the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, and I am also a member of the African Union Committee of Experts on Reparations. And so I am welcoming you to a conversation not only about what is happening in the Caribbean or in St. Lucia, but what is happening globally with reparatory justice. And my first encounter with reparatory justice occurred in a history class at Kville, when my then lecturer, who became then my head of department and became my mentor and became the vice chancellor of the University of the West Indies, said in that lecture, only a black woman could reproduce an enslaved child. And it hit me, and he doesn't know that, but I cried in that lecture. And it was at that moment that I decided I was not going to cry again. Instead, I was going to become a fighter. And so I have been involved in ensuring that the reparatory justice movement will become the movement, as Sir Hilary always says, of the 21st century. And with that, we have been involved, all of us across the region, have been involved in putting together this manifesto that you're going to be hearing about this afternoon on enlightenment. And why enlightenment and why that particular word was chosen? It is because of the fact that right now we are going through a period of erasure. People are trying to now whitewash what our history, and we have to fight against that. And this is what this Reparatory Justice Manifesto is about. We are bringing to light what they are trying to keep out of the light. And so we will present to you a document that has evolved since 2013, 2014, and which is our gift to humanity today. Because it is a gift about humanity. Our reparatory justice movement is about humanity and ensuring dignity for our people. Lots of people have come up to me and said, only in the last few minutes, do you think you will ever get that money? It's not about the money. Yes, the money is important, but it is about the return of our dignity, of our personhood, of who we are as a people. And so the new manifesto demands a number of things from those people who enslaved us. But it also demands things from ourselves with regard to how we treat each other, how we regard each other, how we see Pan-Caribbeanism, and how we see Pan-Africanism. All of these things are embedded in our manifesto. The manifesto, of course, starts with the full and formal apology, which all of us think is important, and which we think has been disregarded, and we have been further disrespected because people do not think we deserve an apology. In fact, some of us think that we don't deserve an apology. Some of us ourselves say that. Why don't we just move on? Why don't we just move on? We cannot move on because one of our points speaks to the issue of the trauma we have faced. And that is very important for us to address. It is also very important for us to address the issues of the indigenous people, who now live in plain sight but are invisible to us. We have to be able to understand what an indigenous program for development means. So we will be talking about the money also, because we need the money to be able to finance these things. But we must not forget who has kept that in our mind, the Rastafarians. Reparations, repatriation is very important within the 10-point manifesto. But more than that, resettlement is important. I want you to know that every time an African jumped from a ship that they were being trafficked across the Atlantic, every time they tried to swim, every time they bought themselves out of enslavement, when they manumitted themselves, the aim was to return to Africa. That was always the aim. And whether we do it now spiritually, physically, mentally, it is very important to this discussion. A new part of the manifesto is the issue related to violence against women. It's very close to my heart because of what I said to you earlier. Women were equal under the whip. Women were equal within the preparations of the entire system, and women reproduced the labor. The wombs of black women became the capital, the labor within the capitalist system. And we have to recognize that. So this welcome address is just a guide with regard to what this manifesto entails. And we look forward to having a deeper discussion with you on all of these issues. So welcome to this discussion on our new manifesto. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Suma. And if you have said all of this, I don't know what you left for me to say about our next speaker. Because I would confess that 12 years ago, it was listening to you and him that has brought me to where I am today, and I could call him teacher and brother. The next speaker is Sir Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies and the chairman of, or the chair, I have been told, the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, among the many other hats, none of which he's wearing this afternoon. But Sir Hilary has led the process of revisiting the 10-point plan, which was produced in 2014 as the guiding step. And it came to a point where, like she said, we've had to revisit that plan, because in life you always have to revisit the progress of life. And it is in that regard that we will be asking Sir Hilary to take us through the issue of why there had to be a manifesto for enlightenment, and not just for enlightenment, a manifesto for enlightenment of humanity. And it is against that background that I invite Sir Hilary, following which we would ask him to, from here, to sit with us to be part of a panel on his own presentation. The floor is yours, Sir Hilary.
Thank you, Earl. Thank you. Friends, colleagues, protocol has been observed. Let us begin by historicizing, okay? I cannot speak without historicizing. There's always a beginning, and I wish to go there, and I go there quickly. Where are we now? And who are we? That's probably the most important question. Who are we? The historical evidence shows that we are in the 5th wave of the reparations movement. This is our time. We are standing on the shoulders of ancestors. This is our moment in time. The first wave, we know, was in the slavery period itself, when free black people would demand compensation and justice. They saw themselves as persons whose labor was stolen, and they wanted compensation for this stolen labor, which is based on a standard philosophy that every human being is entitled to benefit from the fruits of their labor. Why were black people not allowed to enjoy the fruits of their labor? It went to someone else owned that labor. So we had that first wave, and we have many cases of enslaved people becoming free and demanding compensation. Some got, most did not. Then the second wave was the emancipation decade, the 1820s and 30s, when the European parliaments, the British Parliament, was debating, should we free these black people or not? And eventually, they settled on the model that said we will compensate the slave owners, we know that, for the loss of their property. The government was taking their property away from them and therefore had to pay property compensation. It was the first time in the British Parliament that they actually admitted that black people were not human beings, because the compensation they were going to pay was property compensation. To take the taxpayers' money and hand it over, they needed a framework, and they said property compensation. The British government and the British people together, they owned 700,000 black people in the Caribbean, and therefore the value was 45 million pounds. That was our replacement value, or market value, so compensation. The enslaved people then, in the 1820s, were demanding, we too want compensation. So when the decision was taken to give the enslavers compensation, the enslaved said, we too want our compensation. They sent petitions to the British Parliament. What about us? We want compensation for the theft of our labor. What did the British government say? Be still and be quiet. The compensation you are getting is your freedom. We are freeing you, and that is your compensation. That is your reparations. So you take away someone's freedom and their right to their labor, and then those who took it from you then say, the compensation you are receiving is that we're giving you back your life. That is your compensation. Second phase. The third phase was the first generation of free black people in the Caribbean. 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, that generations of free black people are now demanding reparations and compensation right across the Caribbean. They're saying, we have not given up, we want reparatory justice. They were asking for land, they were asking for better wages, they wanted access to social services, schools, and so on, and organizations were springing up across the Caribbean calling for economic and social justice. Well, you know what happened in each case. 1865, Jamaica, they massacred the working people of Jamaica for appropriating unused land to plant crops. In the midst of a famine, to plant crops, the British government authorized the Jamaican government to remove them. And the army went in and massacred thousands of people. The leader, Port Bogle, they put a rope around his neck, and that was how the British government settled that phase. The same thing happened across the region. The newly emancipated all stood up for reparations. Then the fourth phase, of course, was the 1930s. when all of the Caribbean again rose up against colonization. And every island, one after the other, from St. Kitts, Belize, all the way down Barbados, Jamaica, then ultimately Jamaica, all demanded the end of colonization and the beginning of nationhood with reparatory justice. What did the British government do? Send in the troops. Never, never. The troops went in, they massacred the people of the Caribbean again. So we are now, once again, we are in the 5th phase. This is our time. So we have said, as Caribbean people, we're not going to let the struggle of our ancestors go to naught. We are going to take it up. This is our time, our duty, our responsibility to honor the legacy of all of our ancestors who demanded justice. This is our time. And so we rekindled the movement, and we said to ourselves, hopefully, this is going to be the last phase. So June, when we said that this 21st century is going to be the greatest political movement of the world, reparatory justice, we meant it, but we could feel it. All of the people of the world today who have been colonized, who have been enslaved, whose resources were plundered, whose people were stolen, all over the world at this moment in history, everyone is saying, we want justice for what has happened to us. So this might have started in the Caribbean, Africa, America, the black people of this hemisphere, Africa, but now it is everywhere. It is now everywhere. And so at the United Nations 3 or 4 weeks ago, when the resolution was passed, people from all over the world, Asia, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, the Far East, all those people came together and said, we are standing with the African black people on this matter. China, Russia, Iran, all of those countries stood with us. This is the moment. This is it. So here we are now at the final stage where we believe that the case has been made. For 300 years, did we have a legal case to reparatory justice? The answer now is yes. The case has been made. There's nothing more to discuss about whether there's a case or not. The question now is implementation, demand. That's where we are now at this moment. That is why Africa and the CARICOM are now in league providing global leadership for the next phase. I want to end on the point which June made about our women. When the Europeans designed a legal system called chattel slavery, they structured it, they conceptualized it, they designed it, they put it into law. At the center of that was that the black woman was the carrier of the seed of slavery. So the laws were designed that only a black woman, as you heard, could give birth to an enslaved child, because a child at birth, under the laws, took the status of the mother. At birth, the child took the status of the mother. So if the mother was white and the father was an enslaved man, and there are many cases, of course, we have in the records where enslaved men were having children with white women, those babies were born free because a white woman could not give birth to a black child. So all of those babies of mixed race, whose fathers were slaves, but whose mothers were white, those babies were born free. And we have them in the census, X number of so-called mulatto children, born free, mothers white, fathers black. So that became the model. The black women were seen as perfect property. Perfect property is how they were described. You could buy them as property. Now, as you know, when you buy property, it's your property. You can do with your property whatever you wish. You can buy it, lease it, mortgage it, sell it, use it as currency, pay taxes on it. Anything that property did, the black woman did. And on top of that, she gave you babies. By the time the baby was born and weaned and ready to work, the baby was born owning, it now was more valuable than the mother. So let's say you go down Castries and you buy a woman off the slave ship, you pay 30 pounds for her. The first child she gives you, by the time that child is 10 years old, that child is now worth 30 pounds. So the mother's value has been replaced. The next 2 or 3 children is pure profit. You have your return on your investment, and now you have profit from each child is more profit. So she is producing profit and producing money. On top of that, with your property, you have a right to derive social value. So you have sexual access, it's your property. You could not rape a slave woman because in law she was property. You cannot rape property. There was legislation against raping animals. There were laws against the raping of sheep, goats, and cows, but there was no law against raping black women because they were property. And that was the value. So therefore, she gave you economic profit and she gave you social benefits. And the system of slavery was built upon the black woman. And once we understand that, we can understand why it went on so long and how it was structured generation by generation. So when you speak of intergenerational trauma, you're talking about a perfectly conceived system in the imagination of the slave owners. So we say to our women today, and June was in that class I taught at KFIL when the majority of my students were female. And one of them stood up and said, "Professor, you come in here every Tuesday and Thursday and you speak about slavery. But can you not see that the majority of your students are black women? Talk to us about our history. Talk to us about us. Don't talk about slavery in generic terms. There are gender dimensions to this. And black men and black women did not experience slavery in the same way. There were different experiences, fundamentally different experiences. We have to capture all of that." And so I said to the students, there's no material. I don't have any data to give you specific classes on the experiences of women. So I took a year off. I took a semester, and I went to the UK to spend a year in the archives. And what did I find? I found that there is more material in the archives about black women than about black men. There is more data in the archives about the experiences of black women as mothers, as wives, as workers, as reproducers than black men. So therefore, why was the history not written that way in the first place? Because we men, as scholars, as historians, as political scientists, we are the ones who wrote a history by writing women out of their history. So now we are writing history the right way for the first time. So I am saying to you that when you speak of the reparations movement, you speak not only of the phases of history, where we are, but you also speak about the liberation of women's history into the present. This document, finally, Mr. Chairman, I'm beyond my time. As we were sitting, planning our reparations meetings and our next activities and so on, we were hearing in the media that maybe the nuclear solution to the war in Iran is going to come before sooner or later. So we are here at this time in history and hearing of the possibility of dropping nuclear bombs on people to solve a political problem. We're also hearing powerful leaders talking about obliterating civilizations from the earth, obliterating the people, bombing them back to the Stone Age. That is a language that is surrounding us every day. As we breathe the air, we are hearing those sounds of the human species reaching a brink of possible annihilation. So the question is, what do we black people want? We don't only want justice for what has happened to us, to create a level playing field. We are concerned about the future of humanity, because we, the African people, we are the beginning of humanity. It is us, the African people. All the science has now shown life originated in Africa. So we own humanity. Humanity is our product. It has come out of us in our continent. So we have a responsibility for all of humanity because this is the nature of our history. And so we said, reparations is the call for a new enlightenment, that the human species need to admit and accept of these crimes that were committed and imagine a better world for everyone. But before we get there, we have to deal with this, because the truth is that what they did to the African people continues to be a toxic culture in the whole world. The whole world is now obsessed with racism, obsessed with anti-black, and it's spreading like a virus all over the place. So we have to deal with the source of it, and the source of that is here. The reparatory justice by which we say to the world, we have the gift, a gift to help humanity restore its center of gravity. This is the beginning. When we go through this, then we can enter into a new phase. And so when we launched this in Africa 3 weeks ago, we said our foreparents left Africa in chains. They left Africa in chains. But we have now returned to home with this. This is what we have returned home with, a manifesto for justice, freedom, and enlightenment. And so you see, at the end of it, you haven't broken us. You haven't broken us. You send us across the Atlantic in chains, but our minds were never in chain. Our brain was never in chain. And so we're back. And we're back without the chains and with this and many other things. Thank you, Chairman.
Another lesson from Sir Hilary, reminding us that there was an Africa before slavery. And I did skip the protocol earlier, and June helped me halfway. So if you bear with me, I will just take a minute from Sir Hilary's extra time to introduce our special guests here today. And we take them in the order in which they're seated. You've heard Dr. Sumo, Ambassador Sumo, and next to her is Mr. Armstrong Alexis. He's the Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, and he happened to have been born between the pitons. Next to him is the elder and advisor to the Repair Campaign, better known as the former Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves. Next to him is Dr. Jean Leon, the present Executive Director of the Development Bank for Resilient Prosperity. It is also called the Nature Bank. And Dr. Leon was a former president of the Caribbean Development Bank, and the new entity, the Nature Bank, was created by developing countries, development banks in developing countries, and we will hear from him his presentation on the issue of financing reparations. Next to him is Dame Paulette Louisy, St. Lucia's longest serving Governor General, and she's now the Governor General Emerita. So welcome, Dame Paulette. She's a member, founding member of the National Reparations Committee, as is Dr. Sumo. We've heard from Sir Hilary, who is the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Next to him is Sheba Thomas Gifford. Sheba is with the Jamaica branch of the Repair Campaign, and we will be hearing from her during one of our subsequent discussions. Next to her is Mr. Franco Carroll. He is also with the Repair Campaign out of Jamaica, and he is here with a team that also includes Dr. Gonzalez and Shaween Gonzalez. She's the local organizer for the Repair Campaign. Next to him is Mr. David Commission. He is Barbados' ambassador to CARICOM. The other two persons, I would have said my glasses are broken and I cannot see, but I just don't know the names. Sorry? The Chancellor of the University. Oh, Mr. Chancellor. We are so glad to have you, and we're very pleased. In fact, the UWI is in association with the CARICOM Reparations Commission and the repair team. So is the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute for Social and Economic Studies, and of course the UWI Global Campus, of which Dr. Suma is the chair. The other members of our committee here include Nkrumah Lucien, who is a history lecturer at St. Mary's College. We also have with us Leslie Crane Mitchell, the public orator at the Global Campus St. Lucia. And we also have with us, oh yes, okay. Somebody's drawing my attention, but I can't see. My glasses are broken. I do see the I do see, however, I do see the ambassador of Venezuela, Life Escalona, and of course the proceedings last night did include our prayers for Venezuela. I think I do see Shaween and Fiona. They are both with the Repair Campaign. As we go ahead, I will get the names of those who I don't remember or are sitting too far for me to see. And like I said, I'll be very tight on the chairing. So Hillary went 5 minutes over, so we will take 5 minutes off the panel discussion. And what we will do is I will join Dr. Suma and Sir Hillary at these chairs here from the standpoint that we do not need another presentation. I think that from the two of them, we've heard from whence cometh the manifesto for reparatory justice and enlightenment. What we would do during the 20 minutes is to invite you to ask us questions on the manifesto. So, Dr. Suma, Sir Hillary, and I learned something. Have a seat. And you're all gonna hook them up in the meantime. I did learn something this morning that from the chair this morning, and when it was coming to running out of time, she asked each of the panelists to summarize the presentation in one word. And one said, well, I mean to say, she said, no, that's 5 words. So I don't think we'll get to that. I'm going to join the panel. I was not one of the drafters, but I've written so much about it that I can try to answer questions. But certainly the other 2 persons on the panel actually were among the drafters of the manifesto, and the copy that Sir Hillary showed you was circulated at the conference in Accra, in Ghana, where the resolution that has finally described slavery as what it really is was passed And again, the Caribbean and the African Union work together in that regard. So while I was talking, I hope you were thinking of your questions. It's question time. Let's see who's going to be the first. Questions for the floor? The main question is one word: why? Yes, and perhaps, Senator, I remember the point you made about the response in Accra being that we left as enslaved people and we'll come back with the key to freedom. Could you expand a little more on the extent to which the African Union
On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pierre has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives.
Dragged across the Atlantic Ocean, some through the Indian Ocean, some through the Sahara Desert, but it was the largest movement, enforced movement of human beings in the history of humanity. So this is what we are part of. The question was always asked, but what exactly was it that was moving? It wasn't just labor. People were not just units of labor going across the Atlantic to work on plantations. They were carrying with them their philosophies, their religions, their moral structures, their economic thought. They were bringing with them all of the cosmologies of civilization wrapped up in themselves and transported to another place. On arrival, you would expect that that body of ideas and thought which they brought with them would mushroom, and it did mushroom into a survival strategy. Thus, when you heard the mention of jazz and so on. So, where does all this music, this art, this culture, this writing, this philosophy, this theology, where's all that? It is just an expression of what was brought over. Now, so what we did with the African Union was to say to the Africans, you should own this, because all of the things that you see coming out of the Caribbean, you should own all of that, because it is one of your exports and you should own it. And we finally got the government to realize that they cannot say that the black people in the diaspora, that when they walked off the continent of Africa, they walked out of their history. They didn't walk out of the history, they went and made history in another place. So it was a lot of intellectual work that decade after decade went into getting Africans in Africa at all levels to realize that this diaspora world is owned by them. when Usain Bolt did his DNA and realized that he's really an Igbo. The same Igbo in his veins, he's an Igbo. But Nigeria does not say the fastest man in the world is an Igbo. But that's what they should say. That's what they should say. The fastest man in the world is an Igbo. That's what they should be saying. And therefore we, as Jamaica, own him. We too own him because he's one of us. So we've been trying to get the Africans to really own all of the things. We know that every time they are into a celebratory moment, they play reggae music. Anytime the Africans move into celebration, they want drums and bass. And you cannot go anywhere in Africa today, no shop, no rum shop, no palm wine shop, no village, and the first sound you're hearing is reggae music. Occasionally Kaizo. But you see, it's who you are. So I think we have found a cultural unity. I think we've found a balance now. I think the African heads of governments have realized that they cannot go into the future without seeing the diaspora as part and parcel of who they are. So we found the language. I think we have found a political philosophy to integrate ourselves in all that we do. So I think the world is changing now. And this movement is responsible for changes. And of course, they recognize that without the Honorable Marcus Moisés Garvey, none of this would have been possible in our lifetime. So what do? Marcus Garvey is the founding intellectual of all of this Pan-African world. It's truly amazing. Thank you.
Can I add to this?
Yes, go right ahead.
I think that Africa has also moved one step ahead. Because I said earlier that I am a member of the African Union Committee of Experts on Reparations. And I represent the 6th region. Africa has 5 regions, and the diaspora is called the 6th region.
Yeah.
So I sit on that committee representing the 6th region. And David Comijong from Barbados is sitting on the African Union Legal Affairs Committee. So, and he's representing the 6th region. So Africa has now embraced the reparatory justice movement in a way that we ourselves did not even think. We don't have any Africans on our CARICOM reparations committee, but Africa has brought in the diaspora and included us to ensure that the framework that Africa is articulating in this decade of reparatory justice for Africans and people of African descent involves the 6th region. So when the 2 of us go to meetings, we represent our region and the rest of the diaspora on these committees. So I think that it is even deeper. We were involved, for example, in articulating, in crafting and refining the resolution that went to the UN. So that resolution, yes, it was put forward by Ghana on behalf of the African Union, but Caribbean people were also involved in the technical work and the refining work that went into that resolution, ensuring that the language that was used in that resolution also reflected our own thinking at the time, to make sure that words like enslavement that we have been using for a very long time, words like trafficking, the gravest crime against humanity, these things we were involved in crafting to make sure that when that resolution was passed at the United Nations, that all of us could identify with it. So that's to add another dimension.
And,
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I'll give you a quick story. About 10 years ago, I was given a lecture at the Nkrumah University in Kumasi, in the Ashanti land of northern Ghana. And they had asked me to give a lecture on the history of the Ashantis in the Caribbean. The Ashantis as a special ethnic group, their experience in the Caribbean. And I chose to speak about what happened in Guyana and Berbice in 1763. 1763, the Ashantis as an ethnic group got together and drove the Dutch out of Berbice and freed themselves. So before Haiti, the first republic, before Haiti, the first independent nation was in Berbice. So the enslaved people drove the Dutch out, took possession of the colony, and for 9 months, they ran Berbice as their country. And in a ceremony of state, identical to what would happen in Ghana, Kofi, who was the leader of that revolution, was crowned the Asantehene, or the king of Berbice, in classical Ghanaian fashion. But then a civil war developed, because the English next door came to the Dutch and said, listen, let us work out a joint strategy. The Dutch, the English, and the Portuguese, we will come together and shut down this black kingdom, shut it down. So they approached King Kofi and said, listen, Berbice is a big place. You can have half of it for your African kingdom, but we need the rest of it for the sugar plantations. So let's make a deal. King Kofi said, okay, we'll make a deal. But Kofi's military leader was Atta. And Atta said to his king, we should never make a deal with slave owners. They will never honor a deal to us. We must fight them to the end. No deal, no compromise. And so the forces of the king and the forces of the military commander were on opposite sides. When I was telling that story, there were about 800 people in the auditorium, and they broke up in laughter. I had to stop giving my lecture because I couldn't hear myself, and they couldn't hear me. And then I realized that right now, the presidential elections were going on in Ghana, and the incumbent was Kofi, and the challenger was Atta. Atta Mills versus Kofi Kufuor. And all I could say, well, here we are 200 years later, and they're at it again. But the point is that the Africans are now beginning to hear stories from the diaspora about their history in our countries, in our land. So we're now going to the schools and educating the African children about what their foreparents went through when they brought to the Caribbean. So there's a kind of mutual educational process taking place. We're educating them, they're educating us, and it's a wonderful time of cross-fertilization.
I just wanted to quickly ask anybody who's going to be the first to ask a question from the floor. 1, 2, yes. Let's start with you, and then we'll come to him.
Thank you. Rondely Bradley Knowles, the Attorney General for Trucks and Cables. And I read a moment ago that in the 10-point plan, the quantification of the reparations is not going to be on an individual payout basis, but really in terms of helping the jurisdictions that have been affected with these systemic problems. But how do you know, in line with that story that we've just been told, how do you know that those, that there wouldn't be strings attached that will in effect mean that there are no reparations at all?
June, you want to go, or you want me to come? No, I want me to go.
You go ahead.
As stated earlier, I believe we are now in the negotiation stage of this movement. It's no longer a question of if or whether. I was in the British Parliament last week, and colleagues were saying to me that the mood in the British Parliament now is, this reparations thing is galloping. So we should try and make a deal now before it gets worse. So you have different strains of thought, okay? Now, what we do know is that every community in the global African world should determine what they want out of this reparation discourse. There is no mechanical mechanism. We've written the 10-point plan in such a way as to give every community, whether it's Colombia, Brazil, CARICOM, the US, we've given every community in global Africa an opportunity to say the 10-point plan is our framework, but we will domesticate it and apply it to our local situation as needed. The big divide at the moment, not divide in terms of methodology, is between CARICOM and our African American brothers and sisters. Our 10-point plan is really a reparatory justice strategy built around social and economic development. We want development for our people based on reparatory justice. We want better healthcare. We want better schools. We want digital transformation. We want to see an investment in our people who have a right to it, and we will define all of that as reparatory justice. The African Americans have said, okay, we are looking at this differently. You guys in CARICOM had freedom at least 50 years before us. We came to the freedom thing at the end of the 19th century, and there are still people in our countries, in our Alabama, Mississippi, everywhere, who have grandparents and great-grandparents who were slaves. So for them, it's a memory of yesterday. And they're saying, we want cash in hand. We don't want no development investment. All of us who can prove that we were robbed of land, our businesses were burnt to the ground, our animals were slaughtered by racist gangs, we can demonstrate this, we have the records, and we want to be compensated as a family, as individuals, for what has been taken to us. So we have two different directions. Now, our view is that it's a big tent. It's an open tent, and all of us should negotiate on the ground what we want to see. So even within CARICOM, I presume that individual countries would have different emphases. And the reason why you have 10 points is because you could give priority to them. You can say, well, you know, item 7, item 8, critical to us. Countries that have a high indigenous population can say, well, point number 3 is that there has to be a development program for the indigenous people against whom genocide was committed. These islands had over 15 million people in them, and now we're struggling to find 500,000. It's a massive genocide, and Prime Minister Gonzalez knows this because I gave him the documentation. We have documentation from the British government that the islands of St. Lucia and St. Vincent and Dominica are infested with people who are fighting against our plantations. And you have the authority to exterminate them, that's the word. We have correspondence from the British government written in their hand, giving military authority to exterminate those people who infect these islands. So you see, the historians have done their work. Now it's for the economists and the lawyers to figure this out. And the quantum is an interesting paradigm. How would you go about measuring 200 years of free labor from 20 million people? I mean, any economist, run the numbers in your head. If you want to quantify 200 years of free labor from 20 million people, what figure are you talking about? What are you looking at? And that does not include trauma and the suffering and damages for all of that psychological terror. It is just a labor cost. So many organizations and institutions have been doing calculations. And they're saying calculations are in the trillions of pounds. Now, when you put those calculations on the table, the European governments panic because that figure is greater than their gross domestic product. So you see, we are at the stage now where we have to look at this thing in a very scientific way. And one company out of London, a private sector firm in the city of London, ran some numbers. And they said Britain brought 1.3 million Africans into their colonies. 1.3 million. At emancipation, they had somewhere in the region of 400. So, 400,000. So, we had a survival rate of about 20%. Only about 20% of us survive. So, how do you measure that? So, what the economists and the financiers did said, they said we will look at the wage of the lowest paid worker in Britain, who was the lowest paid worker in Britain in the 17th century, the 18th century, the 19th century? The lowest paid worker was an agricultural field hand. The people who cut the wheat and the corn and so on. They're the lowest paid workers. Okay? So we will pay the enslaved people a back pay, calculate a back pay, based on the lowest paid workers in Britain. So if we were to pay the 1.3 million Africans who the British brought here,
I value
the back pay that they would have paid the lowest workers in their own economy, it came to about £9 trillion, which was greater than the gross domestic product of Britain. But as I said, the purpose of these calculations are not to begin a negotiation, but just to let the British public and the world understand how important slavery was to your economy. You couldn't survive without it. You certainly wouldn't have had 12, 13, 14, 15% growth per year without it. So effectively, is to educate them about the enormity of the use of slave labor. 200 years of free labor from 20 million people. That is one hell of a calculation that we have to make.
And that is
Can
what...
can I just add?
Yes.
I'm doing the addition today. But what we should not do, I'm going to tell you what we should not do. We should not allow them to tell us how much is owed to us. You cannot tell me how much my grandfather's back pay was. Neither can you tell me what I should do with that money if I do get it. Which is why we have a framework. You cannot say to me that the old argument that these black people don't know what to do with this money, they will just squander it. Okay? So you cannot tell me what to do with reparatory justice money. This is owed to us. Okay? The other thing that I think is very...
Can I give you a joke on that one? Here it is. About 2 weeks
He's
ago...
an elder. They have stories.
It's too good and relevant.
Okay.
About 2 weeks ago, I was walking through the mall in Jamaica, and I saw this young man, and he asked me if I can give him something. He looked very desperate. He's a beggar on the street. I felt sorry for him, so I gave him a little money. And I said to him, young man, you should go and buy some food to eat. And he looked at me. He said, wait, you telling me what to do with my money?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's no longer your money. The other thing we have to remember is that we should not accept the old argument around us not having the money to give to you. Because it took political will, he said it in his presentation, for the British government to give that percentage of their GDP to people who were considered enslavers. It took political will. The British mentality and the British opinion at that time went against paying compensation to these planters. So the political will at the time did not accept that these British planters should get compensation. The same thing happened in Germany with the Jewish people. The political will ensured that the Jews got compensation for what happened to them. The public will was not the same. Germany was going through reconstruction after the Second World War. But political will said we are going to do it. So where is the political will when it comes to black people? Where is that political will? So that is the other part of the argument. It's not just about the amount, but how we do it and what we do with it. And, and the political will surrounding it.
You know why our African American friends are so determined that they want the reparations cash in hand? I was at a lecture at University of Miami about 5 years ago, and this elderly white lady came up to me and says, "Professor, have you ever seen a reparations check?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she went into her handbag and took out this check.
A Jewish lady?
A Jewish lady. $700. At the top of the check said, United States of America Federal Reserve. She was a Jewish woman. And the reparations deal that was made was that the descendants of all of those Jewish people who were massacred, that they are entitled to reparations for 4 generations. Okay? So every month, she gets a check through the mail. The German government, the Polish government, all of those governments had put the money into a reparations fund. The reparations fund was transferred to the U.S. government. It's managed by the feds, and every month these people get their check through the mail. Now, the majority of workers in the American mail system are black people. And the black people are seeing these checks coming through the mail every day. Reparations checks, and they're the ones processing them. So for the last 40, 50 years, these black workers are mailing out checks to people for reparations. And in the banks, most of the tellers at the front of the bank, not the managers, the tellers are young black people. And they're seeing these people coming in, Jewish, and lodging their reparations check to their account. So the black people in America have been watching reparations check for the last 60 years, coming through the mail and being lodged in bank accounts. And they're saying to themselves, well, hold on a second. Where's our reparations check? We're the ones who went through slavery and Holocaust. Where's our check? So you see, there is this conception of experience. The African Americans want their check in their hand. And they're insistent upon it because that is a Jewish experience that they have been living with for the last 60 years.
And we had a request for a question here. And you'll be our panel.
Question is, Michael Brown. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please. Michael Brown from the Organization for Economic Development and Diplomacy in Canada. My question is simple. What is next? What's next? We were at PFPAD months ago. We went through the declaration. We went through who abstained. Canada seems to be friendly with CARICOM. Canada seems to be wanting to entertain conversation. Is your target only, sorry to use that term, but is your target only the British government? Where does the American and Canadian government stand as far as the reparations conversation is concerned, as far as the payouts, the paybacks? Where does the Canadian government stand in all of this conversation?
And in the interest of time, I would like us to have the second question, and then we'll have the 2 answers.
Okay.
And then we'll move into the second part.
My name is Linda Sobe. I'm the Palestinian ambassador to the CARICOM and to the Caribbean nations. And we are just like those young African Americans standing there on the tellers. Where is our reparation? Who is going to pay all the displacement, all the genocide, all the killing, all the land robbing that is happening day a day and since 1948 in our country? Thank you.
Thank you.
So you want to go first on the first question?
Yes, the question?
Yes, yes. Let me start off with the issue of Canada. And you are quite right. We have close relations with Canada, but our reparatory justice movement in the Caribbean is against those colonial governments who enslaved us, who extracted from us, and who tried to ensure that we did not survive. And so it is not just the British government. We are looking at the French, we are looking at the Dutch, we're looking at the Spanish, we're looking at the Portuguese. In fact, we're looking at the European Union plus the British, because they used to be part of the European Union, but they're not. Because the Swedish, the people from Switzerland, from Norway were also involved. Maybe they didn't have physical plantations except the Danish in St. Croix, etc., in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is another story because they sold an island of people to the United States, islands of people. So they were selling again. So this sale of black people didn't stop with the end of enslavement. They were still selling us. So which is why for me, decolonization is so integral to reparations. And we cannot continue to allow our brothers and sisters in these countries to not be free. So that's one part of it. But I was saying that these countries were involved in making the torture instruments. They were not on plantations, but they were making the chains and all of the things that they used to torture us in the iron industry. So we are looking for reparatory justice from governments. We are looking for reparatory justice from insurance companies who insured these. Remember that we were chattel and we were also insured so that we could be sold, etc., etc. If there's loss, like in the Zong, they could just throw us overboard and claim on our bodies. So insurance companies, banks, the banking system, you know. So it is not just governments. Now, Canada was also a colony at the time. What does the current government owe to Canadians? It's like saying that we were colonies. St. Lucia was a colony. St. Lucia was a colony 7 times under the British and 7 times under the French. So do we now say to the St. Lucia government that you owe us reparations because you are now a government? So the Canadians will have to work this out themselves, because there are other things happening in Canada since then. Okay? So you have to decide what your reparatory justice movement looks like. We have decided what ours looks like, you know. So if you can take things from us, that would help you. For example, I know that in Canada, land is a big issue. I know that environmental issues are very important. A lot of black communities are near dump sites or industrial waste areas. So people have all these health problems and climate problems and environmental problems. So I know there are certain things that we don't have within the Caribbean reparations movement that would be in yours. So we are very happy to be a guide for you and for you to utilize our framework. But I think that the specifics would have to come from you.
Correct.
So that's the
And
answer.
if I may add a little to that, when CARICOM established the Reparations Commission, which was established on the basis of a presentation by David Commission that we need to have something like a commission to take this movement forward. And then after David's presentations and so on, Prime Minister Gonzalez then took it up at the level of heads and proposed that there should be a reparations commission to mobilize Caribbean people for the journey ahead. And that was done. What happened then was that we at the CARICOM Commission sent out a message to African people everywhere. Wherever you have been enslaved, set up a reparations commission. So we have a reparations commission in Canada. We have one in the US, Colombia, Panama, European Union. We have reparations commissions all over the world. So now we are coordinating a global reparations movement. And we are, for example, we are going to speak at the British Parliament on next week Friday. Next week Friday, we're going to the British Parliament. And we have invited the African American Reparations Commission leader to join us. So we're not just going as CARICOM. We are bringing Africa, America along with us. So their leader is going to join us as we go into that British Parliament. So it's a global front, okay? And we're expecting every part of the global black world to not only have their Reparations Commission, do their advocacy, but stand up in respect of their own government to make demands domestically. But on the question of Palestine, I owe it to you, madam, to say that in 2001, Ralph Gonsalves was Prime Minister, and Mayor Motley, as Minister of Foreign Affairs in Barbados, asked me to go to Durban to represent their respective countries. So I went to Durban representing Ralph and representing Mayor in the United Nations Conference. And they put us to sit alphabetically. So the heads of delegations are sitting alphabetically. So my poor self being Beckles, I'm stuck between A and C. And on my left was Arafat. Okay? On my left was Arafat, president of the Palestinian, and on my right was Fidel Castro. And Arafat and Castro realized that this was one struggle. So when I got up to speak, I spoke also about the Palestinian issue. I spoke about the Palestinian issue. When I went to the UN to speak to the second decade at the General Assembly, I started my presentation with what they are doing to our people in Palestine is not only genocide, it's a crime against humanity of the worst kind. And this is the worst thing that we have seen in the 21st century, because all of us in the black world are in tears to see what they're doing, especially to those children. Someone said, oh, we need to go and build schools in Gaza. Why do you want to build schools in Gaza? Why? There are no children? They've killed all the children, so why do you need schools? We need to understand this kind of duplicity. So we embrace that genocide against the Palestinian people as within the same framework as what they did to us as African people. We do not see a boundary between these things. What we see is what power can do. What power can do to people over whom they have military capacity. And some of our human species, with military capacity, there's nothing that they would not do. So all of us are sharing that same philosophical strain of powerful people willing to destroy everyone and everything to maintain their privileges. So yes, it is a part of our campaign, has always been. And I can tell you when Nelson Mandela finally came out of his incarceration of his body, and one of the first thing he did, he went to see Fidel Castro and he went to see Yasser Arafat. Because he said, you know, these are the people who are our blood allies, those Palestinian people. And that's what Mandela did. And Mandela, of course.
And he came to St. Lucia for the CARICOM summit to thank CARICOM in 1998.
So we are with you. Because you are with us.
The tallest statue in Palestine is Nelson Mandela. He is our hero.
There you go.
He's the tallest ever in all the country.
Okay.
And go and stand under it.
Thank you.
Because he said there is no peace until there is peace in Palestine.
Okay, in the interest of time, we want to wrap up this session. We'll have a round of applause for our presenters. And we thank the Palestinian ambassador for her presence and her participation. And the person I couldn't see earlier on is a member of our national executive, the president of the Ayanola Council for Advancement of Rastafari, Captain Aaron Alexander. Give him a round of applause. And now we move.
Can I just say one small thing?
In one word? Okay, one sentence.
Yes, in one word.
Yes.
Give her the 5 minutes I took from you.
No, you took it back, so you owe me 10. Yes,
no,
go ahead.
Because I was in the panel this morning, the session this morning on youth. I want to remind the world, CARICOM, etc., that if we do not bring the young people along in the reparations movement, we are going to lose focus. It was young people who were taken out of Africa, 10 to 40-year-olds, to work on these plantations. It is young women, 10 to 12 years old, who were raped. You know, we have to bring the young people along with us in this movement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I raised my hand earlier, but you didn't see it.
Yeah, my glasses break.
I wanted to critique the cover of this. There
Yes.
should be youth present, their face, to show them that they are part of the struggle. And they were also uprooted from Africa. Not just man and woman, but children were also taken. Because it's families, you know?
That's an early contribution to the next revision.
Yes.
So, brothers and sisters, I don't want to break the flow. So our next session has to do with the whole issue of preparation of reparatory justice reports. And following that, we also have the session by Dr. Leon, who is making a presentation on reparations financing. That is going to be the second presentation on reparations financing. The first was done at the end of the St. Kitts 50th summit last February. And that paper was presented on behalf of the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Ambassador Leon is going to be addressing that issue at this moment. But what I would do is invite Dr. Gonzalez. I don't know if it's reparations you're calculating there, but perhaps you could lead us off by taking the podium and talking to us about, yes, but don't move yet, they have to, the technical people have to untie you. Why reparatory justice reports? Why have the repair campaign and the national organizations have been doing what we discussed?
On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pierre has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives.
Welcome back to the continuation of our conference on the various issues that propel the reparations movement today. And at this point, I want to invite the elder statesman, the elder CARICOM statesman, the former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a founding member, among others, including David Commission, founding members of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and also at present, like I said, an elder and advisor to the repair campaign. And like I was saying, the repair campaign, which is based in Jamaica at this point in time, has been for several years, in the case of St. Lucia from 2022, been working with the government and with the National Reparations Committee on various issues. We started off by discussions, but 2 years ago, we went into the preparation of what we call a joint socio-economic reparatory justice plan. Take a look, only you have seen it on earth. But this is just a draft. And these plans have been done across the Caribbean. And what these plans do is look at the socio-economic situation in every country and come up with proposals to the governments to take the reparation movement, the movement for reparatory justice, to the next level. And therefore, as with the manifesto, what we have done is you'd be providing a document that would have one common objective, but which differs per country because of the socio-economic situation in the particular country. So it is against that background that I invite Dr. Gonzalez to make that presentation on behalf of the repair campaign, following which we will invite Sheba Thomas Gifford to join us, and also online we will be joined by Professor Don Marshall out of Barbados. So let us welcome Dr. Gonzalez.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I would like, first of all, to provide a context and backdrop so that we can understand where we are going in seeking to take steps towards the implementation of the revised 10-point plan of CARICOM, which has just been circulated for reparatory justice. And to see how we can carry forward this work. But as we all know, numbers are not taken in the abstract. You have to have a framework, you have to have some context, and I want to do that. In 2013, I took this issue to CARICOM. Among other things, which CARICOM agreed upon at the time, and I must also put on record that the then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the current Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, was in the chair. I flew to Trinidad and told her what I want to do. We agreed as to how we'd proceed, and then the rest is history. We decided that we'll make the item a permanent item on the calendar, on the agenda of CARICOM. We decided between then and 2014 that we'll set up the institutional framework, CARICOM Reparations Commission, encourage the formation of national reparations commissions, and to have the CRC draw up a framework plan, which CARICOM approved, called the 10-point plan, which has now been revised and which has been circulated, because there's a prime ministerial subcommittee on reparations, which is chaired by Barbados, had a very important meeting on the 12th of June, and this was adopted, what has been circulated. What are we about when we seek reparations? The first thing is to grasp, as CARICOM agreed, that reparations is first of all an international human rights and justice matter. And within the frame that it is an international human rights and justice matter, in the case of the Caribbean, the quest for reparatory justice is to repair the legacies of underdevelopment which can be sourced, and which we indeed source, to native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies. Not complicated. You distill it from the historical work by Hilary Beckles and others, it is an international human rights and justice issue. And within that context, for the Caribbean, it is a quest to repair the legacies, the contemporary legacies of underdevelopment which we source to native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies. Immediately, that framing takes care of the objection by the Conservative and Labour parties in the United Kingdom and elsewhere that reparations, let us not look to the past, let us look to the future. And our answer is, I agree with you. Let us look to the future. And we say also, we don't want to be living in the past, because for us, the present is the past. So that takes care of the matter, because it's the real life legacies which we trace to native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies. And this, as Hilary has pointed out, is intergenerational. It happened over several generations. Therefore, reparatory justice has to be intergenerational. It can't be for persons today, because the repairing will not take place only today. No. We know that $20 million pounds paid to the quote-unquote the slave owners, which was just less than half of what they valued their capital for. But we must remember that those 20 million pounds represented 5% of the gross domestic product of Britain in 1834, and represented between 40 and 50% of the revenue collected by the British government. So I'm putting things within a context. Now, the 10-point plan, as you will see, covers a wide range of issues, from psychological trauma, issues of memory and culture, to health, education, to actual money to do repairing, debt cancellation, and the like. There have been several stabs, metaphorically, at this issue, the compensation dimension of it. And that, Hilary mentioned the Brattle report, which spoke in terms of 23 trillion pounds. And they had a wider frame than many other entities put it forward. Michael Banner, who has written a book recently on Britain's debt, has different calculations. But our people have to come to some clear number. This, from the repair campaign standpoint, and Repair is an NGO with offices in Dublin, in London, and in Jamaica. And it is one of the entities recognized in this report with which the CARICOM Reparations Commission interfaces, and we work together. Because this reparations business, since it's an international human rights and justice matter, it has several different streams. And it is our business for those streams to come together in a mighty river for this great cause. And for those who are doubtful, next month I'm going to be 80, and I'm not doubtful, because great causes have never been won by doubtful men and women. And this is a relay, as Hilary gave that historical outline. You notice how we pull everything together, all the things we come in together. So, the reparations, the repair campaign, of which I am a senior advisor, and since I'm not junior, it's fair that I be senior. And it is factual that I'm an elder. What we have been doing is to look at the budgets, and we can always refine that, of all the CARICOM governments, and to see from the budgets which are presented and from the expenditure which you have, we put matrices in relation to particular programs as outlined in those budgets as a starting point for a period of 50 years. At the same time, because you're addressing the legacies of underdevelopment, there are other frameworks in the United Nations that address legacies of underdevelopment. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So this matter has also got to do the quantification, but specifically earmarked, not the general Sustainable Development Goals, but particular aspects of this which we are sourcing to native genocide and enslavement of African bodies, which can be funded by the countries who got the wealth from the Caribbean. Britain in the case of the former British colonies, Suriname in the case of Holland, Holland in the case of Suriname, and this very special case of Haiti in relation to France. And what we have done for each country, we have done work, as Earl Busquet has pointed out, is to have socioeconomic reparation justice plans for every country. This is a first step. It is not complete, but it is a contribution to this important discussion on the quantification dimensions and fitting in absolutely with the CARICOM 10-point plan. For example, there's the view that we shouldn't take the whole of the budget, we should take out particular aspects of the capital budget and particular aspects of the recurrent budget and quantify them in a manner which is not going to bring you any lesser number than if you take the whole budget. You just weight things differently, and particularly weight them in accordance with the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, which were adopted in 2015, September at the United Nations, they'll go to 2030, they're now to 2035. But this dimension, which we are talking about, will not go to 2035, but will go beyond for years. We can decide when we finally, with the governments, you do it if it's a 50-year or beyond the 50-year generational plan. But this is not to be something discretionary, as June pointed out, because a lot of aid is discretionary. This is not aid. This is something different. It is not something voluntary. It is something which is negotiated, where we come to a very important point. The Repair Campaign, being a global NGO, transatlantic NGO, we have no representative mandate. Governments have to negotiate. But we are working with the governments. And this matter is not a matter which is to be subject to any internal partisan political division. On this matter, we had to be completely at one. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful. And we have to persuade, in one form or another, the intellectual, the elites in Europe and the populations in order to get this matter, to get them to the table, or in the case of Jamaica, which is on the 7th the anniversary of the Zong massacre, is making a presentation to the Privy Council, to King Charles, for adjudication. I'm sure at CARICOM here, and David would know this, the issue which came from the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee was that consideration be given to making a preparation for an application for an advisory opinion to the International Court of Justice. Just want to make one final point, or two final points. First, for us to be clearly consistent in what we are doing, we have to look for every opportunity. When St. Vincent and Grenadines was on the Security Council for 2020-2021, and in the month of November 2020, when we chaired the Security Council, we identify a signature issue which we will address during our month of chairmanship. And we selected the issue of non-traditional drivers of insecurity. And the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines identified as one of our weaknesses about a non-traditional driver of insecurity, the absence of reparations for native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies. And Hillary presented, for the first time, to the Security Council, not the General Assembly, the issue on reparations, because not having it is going to contribute to insecurity in these islands. We have reached a stage. The last point, Earl, is this. Organizationally, Hillary is correct. We are at a different phase now in the struggle, particularly since the March 25th resolution. Our organization to address this struggle is not yet at a level, David, to match this new profile. So we have to, as I suggested, I attended by invitation the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee, the last one. I said we have to put more money to the CRC and we have to give it a secretariat. If we are serious about this thing as a defining issue, we have to put money to it. We have gone past the advocacy stage. We are at a different stage. And similarly, the National Reparatory Commissions, we have to resource them better. If we do all those things, we're going to be able to get a lot of this work which Repair has started to do. And Repair has a fair amount of resources, clearly not unlimited resources, but we have been doing work in this regard and on the sustainable development goals. Between now and when the Commonwealth Heads of Government meet in November in Antigua, a very important stage in post. Before that, there's going to be the third Regional Reparations Conference in Barbados on the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th, coincide with the CPL and the CPL finals. Antigua had the second, St. Vincent had the first one in September 2013. There are things which Hillary's CRC doing this month in London. We did some things last month in the Repair in London. We're going to be doing something fairly significant in early September, prior to the regional conference. And in all of them, it's very important that both the CRC and the Repair campaign work together, and we work very much so in step with that. Tomorrow, a draft will be presented for consideration by the St. Lucia government for the St. Lucia Socioeconomic Reparatory Justice Plan. This is not written in stone. It is a contribution towards the important conversation of quantification. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. And we might also point out that, as planned, Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre and Chairman of CARICOM would have been here today, but they've had a sort of reversal in how CARICOM does these summits now, so they've started with what used to be the end, the caucus, on the first day. So the heads are at caucus today, and Prime Minister cannot be with us here, but we have signaled to the organizers that this briefing room will be available for the next 48 hours. And at some point, we would hope that we would be able to get access to it for the chairman of CARICOM and the host prime minister to have a brief press conference where this document will be handed over to the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Not this copy, but the amended copy, because it's been a long exercise, 2 years of going from one to the other, and the St. Lucia report happens to be the first that is ready. So that will be done tomorrow, and we would urge that you keep your ears open for the time. We move to the next stage of this part of our activity this afternoon, and I'd like us to welcome Sheba Thomas Gifford. She's based with the TRC in Jamaica, and having had to deal with her in preparation for this conference, I actually look forward to what she's going to be saying right now. Let's have a round of applause for Sheba.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheba Thomas Gifford, and I am the campaign manager of the Repair campaign. I believe there's a presentation that should be going up shortly. However, today I'm going to be talking about public engagement, which is an important part of reparatory justice, of the reparatory justice movement, because it's what links the high-level advocacy, the research that's done in the background, to the people who are actually affected by the legacies of colonialism and chattel enslavement. I'm just waiting for a second for my presentation to come up. But in the meantime, the reason why public engagement is such an important part of our work at the Repair campaign is because you can write the best research paper, you can have the best repository of history, but if the people on the ground aren't a part of the movement, then you're losing out on that growth. And the only way to create a sustainable movement is to bring in people from all walks of life and all ages. So as Ambassador Sumer said, we need to have young people in the movement, and I'm lucky to be one of the young adjacent people in the movement. I'm not quite a youth anymore, but in the quite distant, well, in the short past, I was. Is there a problem with the presentation? If you could just give us 1 second, please. Should I go ahead and start without it? Okay, so the first thing I would have spoken about on the presentation is the idea that yes, momentum is growing. However, movements are sustained by people. So in the last couple months, we've seen a lot about reparatory justice in the news all over the world, coming from the Ghana action at the UN, the recent conference, you have the apology by the Pope. However, when you actually speak to people on the ground here in the Caribbean, unfortunately, a lot of that news isn't hitting at the grassroots level. We've done research in 2024. We did it in Jamaica and in Barbados. Over 50% of the people that we spoke to were not aware, or at least were not aware of the depth of the UK's involvement in chattel enslavement in this region. A lot of people don't understand that the issues that we complain about every day, healthcare, infrastructure, they don't know that that is actually linked to the history of colonization. And so for us at the Repair campaign, a key pillar of our work is ensuring that we get that high-level advocacy and the messaging and the information coming out of it, we ensure that it can reach the people on the ground to ensure that we can build a sustainable movement. Coming out of that, visibility is not the same as public understanding. So just because there's been something in the news, it doesn't mean that the average teacher, the person working in a supermarket, it doesn't mean that they even understand or identify with the movement. And that's one of the problems that we've seen in our work on the ground. People in the Caribbean, unfortunately, don't see themselves within the movement. And that's largely because they don't have the information. They don't have the knowledge to say, okay, this is why the community that I've grown up in is economically challenged. This is why the school system in my country is how it is. Any luck on the presentation? Okay, and so for us as advocates in the reparative justice movement, we have to create opportunities for people to see themselves in our work. And we have to use all the channels that are available to us. We have social media as one of them. Traditional media, even though it is dying in some spaces, is still an important way of connecting with people. And then you have the on-the-ground, in-person, door-to-door, community-level engagement, which is also something that I'll speak about. So just to talk quickly about the digital element of, actually, before I do that, I want to speak about the fact that public engagement is not an add-on for reparative justice anymore. As Dr. Gonzalez said, budgetary considerations is something that countries are starting to look at, investing in the NRCs. However, a part of that budget has to go towards public engagement. It has to go to research, it's important, but if you can't get the people in your individual countries to be a part of the movement, you're losing out on building a sustainable movement. And so for social media, thank you. If you could just go forward. The next one. Right, and so digital platforms, they make repair work a lot more accessible. And in 2026, if you're working in the reparation space and you're not consistently posting on social media platforms, you're losing out on millions of people who could be hearing your message. And when I say consistent, not every time you have an event. You need to be posting in between the events to ensure that the people who you've brought on board, they stay with you. But you have to also bring new people on board by sharing information, breaking down that research into bite-sized pieces. And that's something that digital media allows us to do, to take what is often very, very complex and a very heavy topic and to make it relatable. There were some stats on that slide, if you could just bring it back up. The previous one. You passed it, the next one. No, the one about digital media. Yes. So a lot of people say that social media is not the space to talk about reparative justice because it's not TikTok ready material. It's not something that goes viral on Instagram. However, from January to June, the Repair Campaign's material was viewed over 1.5 million times on Instagram alone. That's 1.5 million opportunities to bring new people into the movement. And that's 1.5 million times to educate the public who may not understand how their lives relate to the movement. And that is one platform, and that is organic posting, meaning that we're not paying for ads. This is all giving people information about the history, but also highlighting the work that's being done by NRCs and other advocates in the space. And the reason why I brought up that statistic is to show that there are eyes and ears out there who want to know this information. And once you can put that information into a palatable format, they are willing to engage with you. And they have questions, they want to know more, they want to share their thoughts. And it's an opportunity for you as NRCs, advocates, to understand what is the public thinking. So it's a two-way street in terms of the learning. We're sharing information, but they're also telling us what their concerns are. And we can move forward. And so traditional media, some people believe that traditional media is dead. However, in the Caribbean, traditional media is still a valid way to reach audiences. Radio is still popular with grassroots audiences in the Caribbean. There are a lot of people who still read the newspapers. And television, traditional media, especially in the Caribbean, that is one of our stakeholders that we engage a lot. Between December of last year and May of this year, we piloted community organizing in 4 Caribbean countries, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. However, traditional media was one of the stakeholders that we engaged consistently. And in that period, we were able to get over 20 article publications in those 4 countries, as well as over 25 interviews. So again, the media is interested. However, you do have to cultivate those relationships. You do have to reach out to them, see what their interests are, let them know consistently what you're doing, and see where those partnerships can go. That article is from the Jamaica Gleaner, and it's an interview with our former campaign manager, Brian Royce, which a lot of you, or some of you in this room, who will be familiar with him. To the next slide. And so I spoke about community organizing, which is probably the area that I think NRCs will have the most influence on the ground, because they are the backbone of the reparations movement at the national level. Between December of last year and May of this year, we did community organizing in 4 countries. St. Lucia, and we have our community organizer, Sherwin Gonzalez. Sherwin, if you could just stand up and greet the crowd. We were in Trinidad with Lavelle Francis, we were in St. Kitts and Nevis with Elsie Harry, and we were in Guyana with Kibwe Copeland. And these 4 people were on the ground, full-time, engaging with stakeholders from government officials, schools, community groups, churches, NGOs, across the full spectrum. And the idea was to test, if we have people who are doing this work full-time, can we start to build stronger movements on the ground amongst ordinary people? And that was definitely proven correct. Our community organizers were able to engage over 7,000 people directly at events that they even either hosted or participated in, and a further 8,000 people through different community-based organizations who said, we want to be a part of this movement. Community organizing was probably, actually that picture is from an event in Choiseul here in St. Lucia. We had a beach bonfire, and we engaged people in the constituency speaking about reparatory justice. There were members of government there. There are people from civil society there, and it was an amazing engagement. And this is the kind of work that our community organizers have been doing on the ground. Just the final slide. And so just looking at the different areas of engagement that we work in, you realize that there is space for expanding the movement, but we do have to utilize the channels that we do have at hand. And unfortunately, right now in the movement, we have all this work, we have all this research, and we have great minds. However, we're still not reaching a lot of the people in a very deliberate manner. And that's something that the Repair Campaign stands ready to partner with NRCs and other organizations and share the learnings that activities, be it social media, community organizing, or even how to engage traditional media more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheba. And we, in the interest of time, we have a slight change. The next presenter, Professor Don Marshall, would have been presenting out of Barbados on the airport, but an airport is not a place that you can speak in peace from. So we're making a subsequent arrangement for him to make his presentation. So at this point, what we will do, again, in the interest of time, we will take 2 questions. If not, 1. If not 1, none. We have 1. Could you say that again? Oh, yes, Jacqueline. Mm-hmm. Jacqueline Charles, Miami Herald.
We've been talking about this issue for years. I remember being in St. Vincent
if I were to answer that, I would say simply refer you to the proverb or the saying that when history is written by the hunter, the story is not that of the hunted, and therefore our reaction might very well be a consequence of the enslavement of our minds over a long period of time. But I will ask Dr. Gonzalez to reply to your question briefly.
Jacqueline, we have made progress, but we have a lot more to do. This is a movement which has powerful enemies. Don't fool yourself about it. This is not going to be an easy struggle. And that's why we can't be divided internally, and that's why we have to be better organized than we are. But if you, as Hilary Beckles pointed out, it is getting a lot of traction globally, increasingly. At the Commonwealth Heads of Government in Rwanda, Prince Charles, now King Charles, said that reparations is an issue whose time has now arrived for a mature conversation. Before, nobody is interested in this as a mature conversation. So it has come to the centerpiece of public policy. France, Macron addressed by video the conference in Ghana, the Next Steps conference. Just recently, I was there, Hillary was there, the 18th, was a 3-day conference, but the 18th being the major day. And Macron has moved from a position of amnesia to one of memory. And we take little victories as we get them. And we go in. We don't overstate these movements, but we see the importance of these things. Those are just examples. There's several other things. And because we have pressed for time, I don't want to. Yeah. So I agree with you that we have much more to do. But we have made progress. And remember this. On the 25th of March, the United Nations General Assembly voted 123 countries. Yes, that slavery, transatlantic slave trade, and chattel slavery is, not should be, as the Durban Declaration stated, but is not just a crime against humanity, the gravest crime. 3 countries opposed, only 3. United States of America, Israel, and I think that's significant, and Argentina. European countries abstained, but they didn't say no, because they know that this thing is building up as a major issue of our times. And I'm begging young people, don't ever get weary in this struggle. It's a great cause, and great causes have never been won by doubtful men and women. Never, ever.
Never, never, and never say never. We have, in the interest of time, to move on to our next presentation. Like I said, Dr. Marshall will not be presenting. Our next presentation will be by Dr. Jean Leon. We have a standby technical aspect. Do we take a break before we prepare? Okay. So our next presenter will be Dr. Jean Leon. and his presentation will be on the issue of reparations financing. And without telling you what he's going to be saying, I can tell you that it is going to be a very interesting angle to reparations financing that has not been approached to my knowledge. So, Dr. Leon?
We have a break, right? 2 minutes.
Yes, we have enough. Have to
On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries, and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pierre has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives. On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries, and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pierre has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives.
As a Foreign Service Officer, my work is about representing my country while strengthening the partnerships that connect the Caribbean to the world. Through CARICOM, our nations are able to speak with a stronger, unified voice on the global stage. Whether we are advocating for climate justice, advancing reparatory justice, or protecting the interests of small states, regional cooperation gives the Caribbean greater influence in the international arena. In a changing world, diplomacy and unity matter more than ever. By working together, CARICOM helps ensure that the Caribbean's priorities are heard, respected, and acted upon. That's how CARICOM shapes our Caribbean future.
As a Caribbean student, my future is full of possibilities. Through CARICOM, young people across the region can connect, learn, and pursue opportunities beyond our borders. Our generation will build the Caribbean of tomorrow, innovative, united, and resilient. That's how CARICOM shapes our Caribbean future.
Music has always united the Caribbean, from reggae and soca to calypso and dennery segment. As a Caribbean musician, CARICOM means more opportunities to share our rhythms across the region and beyond. Our music tells the story of who we are as a people, resilient, creative, and connected. Together, we are building a future where Caribbean voices are heard everywhere. That's how CARICOM shapes our Caribbean future.
As St. Lucia prepares to host the 51st regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM, here's a quick fact. CARICOM stands for the Caribbean Community. It was established on July 4th, 1973 with the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, bringing Caribbean nations together to strengthen regional cooperation and development. Today, CARICOM works to promote economic growth, coordinate foreign policy, enhance regional security, and in areas such as education, health, trade, and disaster response. CARICOM is more than an organization. It is a symbol of Caribbean unity and our shared commitment to building a stronger region together. St. Lucia is proud to welcome Caribbean leaders to our shores for this important meeting.
On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pierre has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives. On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pay has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives. On July 1st, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre will assume the chairmanship of CARICOM on behalf of St. Lucia. But what does that actually mean? Does the chairman run CARICOM? Does the chairman make all the decisions? The answer is no. CARICOM is a community of countries and no single country makes decisions on its own. The chairman's role is to help keep CARICOM focused, organized, and moving forward. Think of it like the captain of a team. The captain does not play the game alone, the captain does not make every decision, but the captain helps keep the team focused, united, and moving in the same direction. In much the same way, the chairman helps guide the work of CARICOM. The chairman leads discussions among heads of government. The chairman helps countries find common ground on important regional issues. The chairman also represents CARICOM when the community meets with other countries and international organizations. So why does this matter? For 6 months, St. Lucia has the opportunity to help shape decisions on issues that matter to Caribbean people. It is a responsibility, but it is also an opportunity to provide leadership on the issues facing our region. Prime Minister Pay has said that the chairmanship is not merely a ceremonial position, it is a call to service. His chairmanship will be guided by a simple principle. CARICOM must deliver results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives.
We are back for the, I think, third section. This is going to be a slightly different format. It's a lecture as opposed to a presentation on elements. And I want to follow up on what Earl said. I've designed this particularly as a provocative lecture to get us to think slightly differently about how we see reparations. So let me start protocols having been observed as just saying, first, Dame Perlette, I ought to recognize chair of the session and other guests that are here. So it is a particular honor to stand before you at home, St. Lucia, the island that gave the world Sir Arthur Lewis, the first person of African descent to win the Nobel Prize in economics. A son of the soil who spent his life on one stubborn question: why do some nations rise while others, no less gifted, are held back? Today, I want to take Sir Arthur's question and offer an answer that he did not live to give. Because I've come to believe that the reason nations like ours were held back and the remedy that can finally set us free are one and the same idea. And that idea is not blame, it is design. So today we are here to ask whether reparatory justice can reset sustainable development? Because ultimately that's what this is about. Can we reset sustainable development? And my answer is yes, we can, but only if we understand reparations as something far larger than a check for the past. And we've heard that sentiment expressed from previous speakers. So properly understood, reparatory justice is the blueprint for a system that does not produce the injustice again. Let me just quickly repeat that. It is the blueprint for a system that does not produce the injustice again. So let's argue this line of logic. So first, let's think of a nation's wealth as 4 accounts. The first is what we build, and that includes roads, ports, factories, money. We'll call this produced capital. The second is what nature lends us. Our reefs, our soils, our water, our climate. Let's call this natural capital. The third is our people, their health, their learning, their dignity, and let's call that human capital. And the fourth is what holds a society together, our institutions, our trust, our cohesion, and let's call that societal capital. So there's produced capital, there's natural capital, there's human capital, and there's societal capital. Real development and sustainable development grows all 4 together in one step. So a gain in one is not bought by the quiet destruction of another. That is the entirety of the logic that I want you to focus on. A country can post record income while its forests are thinning, its fisheries are decimated, and its social fabric frays. The income statement looks healthy while the balance sheet hollows out. And I tell you, no serious accountant books the sale of the foundations as profit. Yet, that is exactly how the global economy has been run. And that's the beginning of all of our problems. For 500 years, policy has priced one kind of wealth above all the rest, produced capital, which we all call national income, GDP. Now that capital matters. The mistake was never investing in it, because that happened. The mistake was treating it as if it stood apart from human capital, natural capital, and the social system that sustains it. That was the mistake we made 500 years ago, and I will argue is what has led to where we are today. So we built an entire civilization of measurement around one single number, and everything that we could not see in that number, we called it a side effect. Nature became an externality. Human beings became a line item. And the whole region, I would argue this region, was engineered to feed that number from the outside. In plain words, of the empire itself, not a nail is to be made in the colonies. Now, that is not economics. That is fragmentation wearing the costume of economics. And fragmentation has a price. My colleagues and I call it the silent tax. The accumulated, uncosted bill for treating connected problems as though they stood alone. And just to bring this home, a cyclone destroys homes, crops, water, health, and trust all at once. We answer with a loan for the homes. The damage is systemic. The response is not. And the difference is charged silently to the future, where it compounds. Now let me show you the 3 great wounds this one era that happened 500 years ago has left on the world. Because they are not 3 problems. They are three symptoms of the same disease. So, wound number one is what happens when you price a human being at zero. The system did not overlook human worth. It did something colder. It priced a human being, as we've heard today, as produced capital, property, as property on a balance sheet. And then when that property was free, it compensated the owners for the loss of the asset, as Prime Minister Gonzalez just told us. Here are the facts that are documented in British history. In 1833, Britain emancipated more than 800,000 enslaved people across its empire. To secure that abolition, the Treasury paid the slave owners 20 million pounds, as PM Gonzalez just reminded us, which was about 40% of the government's entire annual budget, in more than 40,000 separate awards. Not a penny went to the people who had been enslaved. Why? Because they were property. And the loan that financed those payments to the owners was so large that it was folded into the national debt and serviced by British taxpayers until 2015. Within the lifetime of everyone in this room, which means that the descendants of the enslaved living and working in Britain were still, through their own taxes, helping to pay off the compensation given to the families that once owned their ancestors. Now, the question really is, if we step back and think through this, reflect on it a little, what exactly is wrong with that picture? The market found a price for a human being as property. That's how they came up with the 20 million. They paid out faithfully for 180 years on the loss of that property. The one entry it never made, not once, was the value of the human being. That missing entry is the injustice that we hear about, and reparations is the invoice for it. I'm coming at this from a different lens. The invoice of the injustice of measuring the human not as value, but as a price of property and compounding it over time, that is the invoice we have today. So that's wound number one. And that comes from the era I said before. We focused on one capital, produced capital, the search for capital, while we put the price of the human at zero. Zero price on the human. So some of us will say, well, that was the past. So let me give you an example today. Ghana, where I think most, including PM, was a few weeks ago at the Reparations in Accra. Let's start there. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire grow about 60% of the world's cocoa. 60%. The chocolate the world eats, an industry worth over $100 billion a year, begins in the soil with the farmers. And how much of that value, can we ask, stays in countries that produce the bean? Around 6%. 6%. So Ghana itself captures $1 billion or $2 of a $130 billion industry. 9 in 10 cocoa farmers do not earn a living income. And to keep growing the crop the world demands, the forest is cut, the natural capital is destroyed to feed a value chain whose rewards accumulate somewhere else entirely. So look at that single arrangement I just described. It drains the human capital and the farmer stays poor. It liquidates natural capital and the forests fail. And the produced and financial capital pools far away on someone else's balance sheet. So all three of the neglected accounts, the human, the social, the natural, are emptied at once by this very act of producing cocoa that the world demands. Focus on one item, produced capital. So the very logic that ran the plantation 300 years ago is the very logic that still holds today in Ghana. And so we might say, how comes we are talking of yesterday, the past, when today we have it in Ghana? And the problem is, if I can quickly run ahead, it is not an issue of yesterday and today, as PM has just said. What we have is the same design, different country. The extraction has not stopped, it has simply changed name. So fundamentally, when we say we are looking at reparations, we need to go even beyond that and ask, what is the system that produced the means through which reparations occurred? The second wound that I want to talk through, the first was we priced the human at zero, and we ended up with reparations. The second wound is what happened when you price nature at zero, because that's the other thing we did. We treat everything as an externality. The holy grail is just produce, get income, GDP, and then everybody is happy. So when you price nature at zero, the same blindness that priced and enslaved, the same blindness that priced the enslaved at zero, and the cocoa farmers' forest at zero, priced the living world also at zero. So we build an economy that treats nature as a warehouse to be emptied, but never a balance sheet to be kept, not the asset. We focus on the income, which is the flow from the asset. The cheapest input, therefore, in global finance today is destruction. Extraction pays now and visibly. We can see it. We can touch it. Preservation pays later and to people who never signed a check. Therefore, capital flows towards what weakens the system. And capital flows to what weakens the system because this is what we are saying we need. That is the return we want. In the holy grail of income, produced assets, we are quite happy to weaken people, weaken societies, decimate nature, all because its price is zero. And don't let anyone tell you nature cannot be valued. Of course it can. Markets already value it, only that they value it on the wrong side of the ledger and they value it too late. The World Bank now counts the world's mangroves as $850 billion of flood protection infrastructure. Intact, they avert more than $65 billion in damage and shield some 15 million people every single year. If you lose those mangroves, the cost still arrives, but it arrives as a disaster bill. But the value is never in the appraisal that financed the development that destroyed them. Every island here understands and knows that mathematics by heart. And when the wider bill arrives, then we ask the question, how do we pay for it? Last September, scientists reported 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries that keep this Earth stable have now been breached. The newest to fall for the first time is ocean acidification. So for a room of islanders, Caribbean people, this is not a chat. It is the reef outside the window. It's the fishery that feeds the village. When we call for loss and damage, we are not asking for charity. We are presenting the same invoice as reparations. One is the invoice of pricing the human at zero. The other is the invoice of pricing nature at zero. That is the cost of capital the system refused to count. In this case, it refused to count the cost of nature. The third wound I want to mention is when we refuse to value people's dignity and inclusion. And Ambassador Suma talked about it is not the money, it is equally about the dignity. If we refuse to value dignity and inclusion, we get exactly what you would expect: widening inequality, marginalization, and a multilateral system that is too fractured to fix any of it. Worse, at the moment, we now price vulnerability of exposed nations as if it were a permanent weakness. Permanent weakness means your risk is too high, your cost of capital premium goes up, your ability to borrow goes down, your debt continues to magnify, and you don't have any way but to stay in your lane crippled. The IMF finds that the most climate vulnerable countries pay around 230 basis points more to borrow than resilient ones, a penalty that holds even after every usual driver of sovereign risk is accounted for. And so vulnerability priced as permanence becomes permanent. Now, again, I want to mention this here. These are things that are arising because of the way the system is set. The capital, the credit rating agency, the ability to lend is dependent on risk. But if that risk is being overpriced because of a perception that is not permanent, that is made permanent, then the system is what is causing our problem. But we do not talk about the system. We focus on one part of the system. And herein lies the problem that we have. So let me bring the three wounds together, because I think it tells the same story. Reparations for slavery, loss and damage for ecological ruin, the fight against inequality. We treat those as separate campaigns in three separate rooms on three separate days. Truth of the matter is they are not separate. They are three invoices for the same mistake. A system that counts one form of wealth and throws away the other three. And to answer them one at a time in isolation is to repeat the very fragmentation that caused the harm in the first place. And I think at COP27, PM Motley was very clear in making that statement. She says, we were the ones whose blood, sweat, and tears financed the Industrial Revolution. And now they face double jeopardy by having to pay the cost as a result of those greenhouse gases from the Industrial Revolution. But the greenhouse gases did not originate because of the Industrial Revolution. They originated because the Industrial Revolution said the price of nature was zero. If we had a price on nature from the word go, capital would not have flowed strictly into produced capital to therefore then say we have an invoice today, which is what we call climate change. And if we did not have people being priced at zero, all under the banner of making income and money, we probably would never have capital flowing to generate the slavery that we had and the invoice of reparations today. So bringing this together says, it is the same missing entry on the same ledger presented to our people twice. And unless we change the ledger, the way we measure, the way we book, I dare say it will happen a third time. And so let me just step back a little here, because I've painted a picture that says whether it's reparations, whether it is loss and damage, whether it is inequity, poverty that continues, it is a problem of the system from an era dating back 500 years ago. That's what defined the system. And someone asked the question, have we made progress on the loss and on the reparations? I think let's be brief and honest about this. The idea matured slowly, as I think we've heard from the two previous speakers today. From the Abuja Proclamation in 1993 to the Durban recognition of slavery as a crime against humanity in 2001, to the moment in 2013 when CARICOM heads established the Reparations Commission, and the next year adopted by Sir Hilary Beckles' 10-point plan. Then it was quantified by, again, we've heard the Brattle Group in 2023, who put the harm of transatlantic slavery at somewhere between 100 and 130 trillion US dollars. Then it went global, with the African Union joining its cause to ours. Past March, United Nations, again we've heard, by a vote of 132 nations, declared enslavement of Africans the greatest crime against humanity. And last month in Accra, more than 80 countries merged the African and Caribbean plans into a single framework. President Mahama himself reminded the world that history does not ask us to inherit guilt, but it does ask us to inherit responsibility. Now, I would not call this lack of progress. In fact, I think, as again, PM, you mentioned, this is extraordinary momentum. But let us be equally clear about what Accra did not produce. No agreed sum, or at least not yet. No mechanism, no check. And so we can argue we've built the courtroom, but we have not yet received the money. And there is one thing missing that I want to convey, having painted the picture of the four capitals and the system. We have argued brilliantly about the size of the debt, the shape of the payment. Judge Robinson has told us rightly, reparations must build development, not fill individual pockets. Sir Hilary Beckles calls reparatory justice part of our development conversation, and he is right. And so I stand on their shoulders when I ask the question, can we reset, or can reparatory justice reset sustainable development? And I come to one conclusion: there is still one step to take. We have not yet said or asked the harder question, that the debt was manufactured by a system of counting. The zero price of the human, zero price of nature, zero price of society. And so, because it was manufactured by a system of counting, unless we change the counting, we are merely agreeing on the price of a mistake we fully intend to keep making. Can I repeat that? Yes. So, the debts that we have now, whether it's slavery debt, climate change debt, inequality debt, that debt was manufactured by a system of counting, the zero price that we have argued, and that unless we change the counting from zero price to something else, then we are merely agreeing among ourselves on the price of a mistake that we fully intend to keep making. Because if we don't change the system, we will continue to have additional debt after we have cleared the current debt. That is the part that is missing in the arguments that we are having today. So let me ask two questions to bring this home. And I think that's, for me, the question that should keep all of us in here awake at night. So question number one, supposing the debt is paid. We agree on the amount, and we pay the debt, pay it in full this year, 2026. The first question we would need to ask in the spirit of sustainable development is how should we direct it for the best possible development? I know the comrade here, PM Gonzalez, says we have to do it step at a time and we need to consider how, but it's a question we need to start thinking about. How do we direct it for the best possible question? Surely it should not be consumption, because that will be gone in the next season. And it cannot be scattered across 100 disconnected projects, because that only recreates the fragmentation in a miniature form. So if reparations are to mean anything, they must be invested, these reparations must be invested to rebuild the 3 starved accounts that we started with and rebuild them in balance in our people, in our nature, in our institutions, along with the roads and ports that we already know how to build. Because if not, we are not going to be building the 4 capitals that define prosperity. So how we use that money is a very important concept that we need to dig deeper in. So from that perspective, the reparations portfolio and the sustainable development portfolio are one and the same portfolio. One and the same portfolio. If we spend it in another way, we rebuild the very imbalance that caused us the harm in the first place. So it's about fixing a system at its very heart to do one key purpose, preventing the injustice from repeating itself. If not, we are at the point of the second question. The second question says, suppose again we pay everything in full this year, 2026. What then stops our great-grandchildren from gathering in this same hall in the year 2126 and demanding a new set of reparations for the century between now and 2126? What prevents us from being in that situation? Are we hearing that well? Yes. Supposing we got paid. We agree on a number. The parties pay us, pay in full in 2026. What prevents, what stops our great-grandchildren to come here at Sandals in 2126, 100 years from now, and demand reparations for 2026 through 2126? And if the answer to that is nothing, then we have not solved the problem. That's the inescapable conclusion. We have not solved the problem. And we have not solved the problem because what we chose to do was to refinance the problem. Because the cost has not disappeared. It has simply moved to somebody else, and in particular to the generations who had to come, who had simply no say in the deal. And therefore, what I am about to ask is, let us take all that we have already accomplished, but we need to add an additional pillar, an additional dimension to the reparations that says whatever we need to do needs to prevent that very question of our grandkids in the year 2126 coming back here and saying they need reparations from the time that we got paid until then at that point. If we don't do that, we are not solving the problem in its full way. So here's the way I want you to think about this by way of example. A hurricane strikes. Instant shock. We finance 3 things without pausing. We rescue people overnight. We recover by rebuilding the houses or some houses during the first year. And if we are wise in our choices, we reposition by building back stronger so the next storm costs us less. But what we are suffering today is not one storm. It's a slow storm, 5 centuries in the making, and the accumulated outcome of various slow onset events. So the same logic that we use for the hurricane, the shock, is the same logic we should use for this slow 500-year problem. And I think that tells me one key point, that this is partly why the reparations debate is stuck, because it is stuck in the recovery mode. We argue restore what was taken. Absolutely critical, essential. But if we rebuild the same house on the same fault line, we have simply guaranteed the next collapse. We don't know when, but it's going to come. So the piece, therefore, we need to integrate as a pillar in the repositioning, in the reparations debate, is the repositioning of what we do after reparations are paid. And that means we need to come back and re-examine the system that caused the need for reparations in the first place. Yeah. So here's the reset that I propose. Or the error, and let's run it backwards. The old system that brought us where we are, we said was one account, the produced asset account, was made king, and everything else was left behind. The new system needs to have prices for all 4 capitals. By putting prices, we place a real cost on running down nature. We place a real cost on running down the real value of human dignity. We place value on running down every financial decision that is made under the false pretext that these do not have cost. So that rewires the entire risk-return metric and changes the investment equation. Capital stops rewarding the destruction of the whole. So at the essence of it, what we need is a genuine price for human capital, a genuine price for natural capital, and a genuine price for societal capital, and a policy framework that seeks to optimize produced capital, natural capital, human capital, social capital as one. And once you bring it together as one, capital flowing to where the return is highest, we're not asking them to change, will automatically invest in what was before zero-priced elements of our capital. And that is what I believe has killed the development of nations, the question that Sir Arthur Lewis was grappling with. And let me be clear, this is not anti-growth. Some might say, am I talking anti-growth? No, I'm not. In fact, it is the opposite. It is the absence of the charge on destruction that, in fact, is anti-growth. Let's say it plainly. We have anti-growth and anti-peace because it liquidates the base on which all future growth and all future stability depends. So we are not talking about charity. We are talking about a discipline that measures comprehensive wealth, not just income. We attach a wealth statement, impact statement to every decision that we make so we can see what the project builds and what it depletes. We appraise portfolios, not individual projects, because it is very clear a seawall without the mangrove only moves the risk. And we need to reprice vulnerability as something that investment can reduce, not a life sentence. At the moment, we treat vulnerability as a life sentence. If we can talk about investing in the reverse of vulnerability, which is in resilience, then we end up with an investable outcome, which is resilience, as opposed to the life sentence of vulnerability. And we need to treat capacity building not as an add-on, not as charity, but what it truly is. Capacity building is another name for risk reduction. Because if we build the capacity to be able to generate tomorrow, the future risk that you face when you're looking at it as capital automatically goes down. Therefore, the risk premium goes down. But we don't treat capacity building in that sense. We think of it as an add-on on the side. It has to be integrated as part of the human capital and social capital elements of this comprehensive wealth. Then what we do is we argue with the providers of capital that the cost has to go down because the risk goes down. Therefore, the price of capital goes down, and it is now more affordable. And we can get out of the debt trap because, in principle, what we have done is designed risk mitigation as part of a policy. Designed risk mitigation as part of a policy. And some of those tools are already there. What's missing is the will to use them together. And we need an institution that is built to do just that. And that is why we are building the Development Bank for Resilient Prosperity, which we call the Nature Bank, to treat nature as a productive asset, to treat resilience as an investable outcome, and to finance our regeneration faster than we degenerate. This is the moment where systems thinking stops sounding abstract and starts sounding like common sense. And to do this, and when we do this, reparatory justice becomes something far greater than a settlement, because it does two things at the same time. It rights the wrong that was done. That's what we are now saying. But it also removes the reason that wrong could be done again. So it is the one that repairs, is the one repair that does not have to be repeated. But if we do not put the reason why the wrong occurred on the exit lane, then we are guaranteeing that in the future, we will be back asking for more of the reparations that we are talking about. So from that perspective, systems thinking is not our preference. It is our only exit. It is our only exit. So therefore, let me close with 3 points that I think I would love the conference CARICOM heads to think about. And I want to call them 3 decisions that would make a change, make a difference. The first is, let CARICOM measure what it means to protect. Let CARICOM measure what it means to protect. So mandate a comprehensive wealth impact statement. That is, when I say impact statement, what is built, what is depleted, across all 4 of the capitals. And impact measurement of what it means for fiscal, debt, and investment decisions. And let the community be the first in the world to be governed by its balance sheet, not by its income statement. And that's why we need wealth impact statements, because wealth, by definition, is a balance sheet concept, a stock. And so if we measure what every investment means for that stock of all 4 capitals, produced, human, societal, natural, and we say the impact, that's the wealth impact statement, the impact of what we are doing, how it increases, diminishes, or degenerates those capitals over time, then we will be investing on a balance sheet basis, not on the elusive, illusionary income statement that we've been doing for the last 500 years. So the call here is to measure what it means to protect, to preserve the balance sheet of the region, and declare that we want to be the first in the world to be governed by a balance sheet and not strictly by an income statement. The second I would like to ask is, when the merged Accra framework goes to the UN General Assembly in September, let the community, CARICOM, add the pillar that is missing today, the repositioning pillar. So negotiate reparations not as a check, but as a single integrated portfolio of rescue, recovery, and redesign, with non-recurrence written into the terms. That is how we make certain that there is no invoice in 21-26. You must have non-recurrence written into the terms of that. The third is, in every forum that we engage, whether it's the UN, at COP, at the IMF, the World Bank, engaging with credit rating agencies, we need to champion together as a region one modest capital reform. And that is to add an explicit charge in every appraisal for the natural and human capital that a decision draws down. In other words, anything that we do that draws down human and natural capital, from loss of dignity to abuse to decimation of our natural capital, let's put a charge for that. In other words, move from zero price to a positive price. Now, when you do that, you change, because it's in the appraisal, you change the entirety of the economic decision, financial decision making that we are talking about. Now, let's understand this well. When I say a charge, I am not talking about taxes. There are no taxes here. It is just an entry, because it's a ledger. It's an entry that a loan officer, a rating analyst, and a finance ministry can no longer leave blank by putting it at zero. So you put the charge in the appraisal, and the rest of the reset follows. So let me be clear about what this is and what it is not. It is not the Caribbean asking the world for a favor. It is the Caribbean offering the world a new design. Because a fragmented planet does not in the end serve even the most powerful nations. If we do not serve the whole, we will not serve ourselves either. And this community has said it best in its own declaration this year, and I think we are all familiar with this, Professor Robinson's quote, "None will come to save us. Therefore, we must save ourselves." The scientists have put our situation the following way. failure is not inevitable. Failure is a choice. Failure is a choice. So therefore, let's make success also a choice. So I have 3 pleas to the governments around. Let's invest in resilience, but not just invest in resilience. Appraise and invest in resilience with the appropriate measure, with the appropriate costing. Get away from the zero price. And that shifts us from income to balance sheets in terms of our appraisal. To the private sector, that was the government's charge. To the private sector, put your capital where it heals the system. Because if you don't fix the system, we are not going to get where we are. And that return is going to be real and is going to be lasting. It will not be a fleeting one-day's matter. And to the rest of us who are not in the private sector capital and we are not governments, let us refuse to accept half measures. Let's make that silent tax I talked about audible, and let us ask those who lead us to stop paying that silent tax. So, in closing, Alpha Lewis asked why nations that should rise are held back. Today, I have tried to give an answer I think Sir Alpha would consider. Nations were held back by a system that counted one kind of wealth and threw away the rest. And then, unfortunately, they called that wreckage progress. And we all drank the Kool-Aid and accepted that that was progress. But today, we are faced with 3 invoices. 3 invoices from that very issue that was raised. And the only way we get out of this with non-recurrence is by changing the system, by rewiring the system to allow us to make now decisions that will last and endure. So we can do that, not by paying it off, which is shifting the finance, but by writing it correctly, rewriting it correctly. And so we can build the first development change here in the Caribbean that has not occurred in the last 500 years on one key principle. Let that development be designed such that the wound won't open again. The wound must never be allowed to reopen again. That is what reparatory justice can reset. So let us be the generation that chooses it and ensures that resilient prosperity ceases to be a phrase, but becomes a place where our people can live. Thank you.
And what a way to almost end our session today. We had a 3-hour time frame. We started half an hour late. We are now at the 3-hour point, and I would crave your indulgence for just 5 more minutes to go to the other extension from what Dr. Leon has been saying to us, and that is the importance of investing our money in people and in mechanisms. And Kimani Goddard, who has a long association with the World Intellectual Property Organization, will give us a 5-minute presentation on a proposal for a mechanism that would help implement most of what we've heard today, insofar as the need for innovation and creation and protection. So, next 5 minutes, let us hear from Kimani, who also has some figures to present. Let's welcome Kimani.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. That's what I'm supposed to do. Let's see. Can't seem to.
What have your minutes done?
Okay, I think I've got my screen there now. Okay. So thank you very much, recognizing protocol, and thank you very much, Dr. Leo, for that very, very interesting speech. What I'm going to talk about is the Center for Knowledge, Intellectual Property, and Innovation Economy. And you may ask what this has to do with reparations and repairing systems, the systems of extraction and exploitation. And I think I can help with that. Let's go forward. We're trying to make progress. So we mentioned, we talked about finances, we talked about systems. And what I want to say before I really jump into my presentation is that many times we look at what has happened in the past and what is happening in larger systems like the financial systems of the World Bank and how this recreates some of the damages that happened during colonialism and during the transatlantic slave trade. Sometimes we as members of the diaspora, the African diaspora, those of us in the Caribbean, we don't look very closely at some of the international agreements and some of the policies that we take on board. Policies that are designed to replicate that extraction that we experienced during colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. And I want to point out, just to start my presentation and go into it, I want to point out an agreement called the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing. And this agreement, because I'm talking about knowledge and some of the problems that we have as people who have been extracted and exploited, access and benefit sharing as it is structured under the Nagoya Protocol is structured in a way that if you do not have the resources as a result of what we have experienced to engage in valorizing your intellectual property, valorizing your traditional knowledge, your traditional medicinal knowledge and your environmental knowledge, your cultural knowledge. If you do not have this finance to invest in it and have the systems and institutions that can come into contact and meet at a level of equality with systems of Western countries, then signing an access and benefit sharing agreement under the Nagoya Protocol is just another piece of extraction. And it does not end where it would not end where you want it to end. There are other treaties. The Nagoya Protocol is an intellectual property agreement, masking as a biodiversity agreement, and it should be brought into the World Intellectual Property Organization and placed in its specific area where it is an intellectual property treaty where people can value it and treat it as that and see what the pitfalls are in signing these sorts of agreements. Interestingly enough, the World Intellectual Property Organization has developed the Treaty on Intellectual Property Traditional Knowledge, Genetic Resources and Associated Traditional Knowledge that has the full participation of the Global South and is a very progressive treaty that treats the knowledge of Afro-descendants and indigenous people as their intellectual property and values it properly in the system. not what the Nagoya Protocol is doing, which is seeking to access our knowledge while we have very, very underdeveloped systems to use that knowledge to our advantage. Okay, so I want to just go forward and say, when we're talking about building an equitable global knowledge and intellectual property economy for the 21st century, that is one of the most important things that we can do at the moment. Building an intellectual property and innovation economy for the 21st century is among the necessary steps to repairing historical systems, it's still there. That can is a necessary step to repairing historical systems and global systems that continue to manufacture inequality, economic precarity within the Caribbean region and in the wider global South. The ownership and participation and application of knowledge assets is an important foundation for economic development and the modern global economy, and has been shaped by histories of colonialism, slavery, structurally stifling financial systems that make it difficult for countries like ours to advance in global technology. So in addition, the recent intensification of deployment of artificial intelligence technologies to extract valuable knowledge and data has highlighted the need for the global South countries to take on the task of building the framework for an equitable global knowledge and intellectual property system. The current system we have, although we have to use the current intellectual property system that we have, it is not perfect, and it is the task now, as part of repair, as part of taking back our knowledge systems and monetizing and commercializing them for ourselves, that we take back the system of redesigning and approaching global knowledge systems in the 21st century, because artificial intelligence is about who will own the global knowledge of mankind and who will own that intellectual property and who gets to benefit from it generations into the future. Okay? So an equitable global knowledge economy ecosystem requires the creation of structural frameworks and institutions that allow states, regardless of size and stage of development, to be able to transform their existing societal knowledge, resources into commercially viable industries, valuable intellectual property assets, continued knowledge generation, and research and development. It cultivates the just allocation of the ownership of and access to bits of the knowledge and intellectual property of mankind. Many societies hold vast quantities of valuable knowledge and non-formalized intellectual property assets embedded within their genetic resources, traditional cultural knowledge, and traditional practices, as well as environmental resources. They also hold large databases of untapped economically, socially, and culturally valuable knowledge in archives and institutions. In the age of ubiquitous AI technologies, the future of equitable sustainable development in the Caribbean region and the world depends on building knowledge and intellectual property ecosystems that are more equitable and efficient at facilitating countries' use of their knowledge resources in ways that promote shared societal prosperity alongside environmental sustainability. As our contribution here in advancing a just and equitable economy in the Caribbean, I propose to you the Center for Knowledge, Intellectual Property, and Innovation Economy. It is proposed as an ecosystem in order to address the challenges, opportunities for the Caribbean in taking its place among the architects of the global knowledge economy. So we'll go quickly through that. What we have in intellectual property, one of the problems, and I don't want to go too deep into detail, is we have something we call the Valley of Death. And the Caribbean and many developing countries around the world suffer from the Valley of Death. They have knowledge, they have lots of traditional knowledge, cultural knowledge, resources, but they are unable to take that, turn it into actionable research, and turn it into inventions and commercializable knowledge. In much more developed countries, the Valley of Death simply refers to where you've put some money into basic research, but you don't see it as profitable, so it doesn't go on to industry. We have a much more severe problem in the Global South, in that much of our knowledge that sits as repositories in our traditional knowledge is there, we have it, and we think it's protected. But as you can see from the Nagoya Protocol, those same systems that exploited us for 500 years are coming after those resources as well. So this is a time to look at reparations, not only in terms of the normal debt, debt forgiveness, and so on that we're looking at, but looking at how we're constructively engaging with certain kinds of systems, legal systems, international legal systems, that produce harm, damage, and extraction into the future. And the intellectual property system, because of its very long, for example, a patent is 20 years, a copyright is the life of the author plus 50 or 70 years, that once those assets, once those cultural and knowledge assets are out of your hands, your economy goes along with it, and it does not recover for generations. So this is just a little diagram just to show you what an innovation stakeholder system is, and it shows you how universities, industries, government, and financing, right, participate in the system, and where the system often breaks down in developing countries. Many times we don't even start the research, and although we do have the traditional knowledge already in our systems to know what, for example, certain flora and fauna are good for, so it is much more simple for us to design a research to produce valuable, patentable, and commercializable products. But much of our knowledge sits unvalued, unused, and often sometimes gets poached by outside entities. So we never get to this phase. So we're in no man's land. We're not even in the valley of death, of dead inventions that never get commercialized. Useful, but they never get commercialized because of lack of financing and lack of researchers. So this is just artist rendering of the knowledge innovation, the Center for Knowledge Innovation and Intellectual Innovation Economy. And I know we have little time. You want to see? Oh, we didn't see the image. This is our architect's rendering for what we hope it to be, based in St. Lucia, obviously. but with a global outlook and a CARICOM outlook. So the knowledge, intellectual property, and innovation economic expansion involves several mutually reinforcing policy actions, legislative and institutional initiatives. However, the key implementation arm is what I showed you, the CIPEC, the Center for Knowledge, Intellectual Property, and Innovation Economy, and it is a multidisciplinary institution oriented toward combining applied higher education, research and development with building innovation systems and commercial intellectual property acquisition, as well as product and enterprise development and spin-out. CIPEC combines the activities of a technology transfer office, a research and product development lab, higher education and IP commercialization into one institution. This reduces costs, information asymmetries, and time lags between different nodes in the ecosystem. So one of the things about doing research that turns into industry changing and industry creating technology is that it is expensive. One of the things that makes it expensive is the system is often disaggregated. You have universities on one end, you have enterprises on another end, you have regulatory agencies on another end, and so on. So what CIPEC does is it takes all of these and it puts it under one roof. And this is a model that is particularly useful for small and developing states, because what it does, it uses the cluster philosophy of manufacturing by putting all of these institutions under one roof: education and research, Office of Technology Transfer, intellectual property acquisition, business investment and spin out. What it does, it reduces the friction and it reduces the time and the cost of developing a successful piece of research into a marketable product that can then be on the market, create new industries and new jobs. So removing the barriers, that's what this institution does, removing the barriers to innovation, to commercializable innovation that creates high value jobs and a sustainable, durable economy. So Caribbean countries must become implementers and generators of commercially valuable knowledge rather than to remain passive buyers and users of technology outputs. That's another way that we are taxed by the system that we are currently in. We are being taxed through licensing agreements, and in many cases, especially for medications, we are using medications that are based on our own traditional knowledge. So I'm getting a thing that I have to conclude. So what I will say is that the idea is to build an ecosystem, a social and cultural, for social and cultural development targets. And what this organization is, it is a future foundation of achieving a society of human flourishing and prosperity in the real sense, where our intellectual property, our traditional cultural knowledge, the biochemical knowledge about our flora, fauna belongs to us, that we have the capability to do research and develop products and industries from them. For the Caribbean, as small economies, a knowledge economy approach to development is our best bet to becoming sustainable, prosperous economies, and it can overcome many of the difficulties of economies of scale that we currently have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kimani, for pulling the curtains down. Another round of applause, if you don't mind. some house matters before we leave, but I also wanted to point to the presence of one person who I saw early but didn't see later. And we are honored with the presence here of the senior representative, I think managing director it is called, of the Caribbean Development Fund, Mr. Roddy Suba. Not the Caribbean, sorry? CEO of the Caribbean Development Fund. CARICOM Development Fund. The reason why I've gone all that way is because it quite often gets described as another Caribbean development something. We have come to the end of today's session. We want to thank our technical people for let's give them a round of appreciation. We want to thank all of you who have made it a duty to be here. Another person I want to identify is Fiona Compton, who in her work online reaches more people than many of us would imagine, in the hundreds of thousands. Can we see you? Can we see who is Fiona? Yes, yes, yes. And we also would like for all persons who have received, that's very important, visitors' documents, we want you to hand it back on the way out because they have to be given to others. The conference starts tomorrow. For saving time, I will also do the vote of thanks. We want to thank the government of St. Lucia and the Caribbean community, Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Office of the Prime Minister, Events St. Lucia, GIS, NTN, SASCAonline.com, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and the NRC members who are here today, the delegation from the Repair Campaign, our delegation from Canada who was here and made a contribution. We want to thank all the presenters and panelists, the overseas delegates and guards. We want to thank Sandals. We want to thank Sandals, and of course we want to thank Herb Black for the video that started us off. Thanks for coming. And thank you for thanking me. Yes. So folks, we have come, we are going to be publishing and producing Dr. Leon's presentation. We will ask Imani to make that presentation in a bigger way because it was to have been a side event here, but there is competition for access to this small room, so we have to make a special arrangement for her to make a special presentation at a later time. And her principals at the World Intellectual Property Organization, the Deputy Director General is from Ghana, and he has sent his greetings to us and has promised the cooperation of WIPO in what we are doing. So thanks again to all of you for coming, and the conference starts today. And we thank everyone once again.